Okay, so let's get into this. We're talking about Tracee Ellis Ross today.
Right. Hugely successful, great personality.
Absolutely. And she's made some interesting comments about dating that caught our eye.
Specifically.
Well, there's this piece on worldstar.com. It's highlighting her preference for dating younger men.
Okay. And the article gives a reason, I assume. That's usually the interesting part.
It does, and
Mm.
it's quite a statement. The piece really zeroes in on her experiences with men closer to her own age.
Ah, okay. So what's the connection there?
The headline is pretty blunt. Tracee Ellis Ross says she only dates younger men because of the toxic masculinity in men her age.
Wow. Okay. That's direct.
It is. So that's our focus for this deep dive,
Yeah.
unpacking what that article implies, her reasoning, and this whole concept of toxic masculinity in that context.
Right. And it's probably worth clarifying for anyone listening what toxic masculinity generally refers to in discussions like this.
Good point.
It's usually about certain harmful societal norms or pressures associated with manhood. Things like suppressing emotions or maybe needing to project dominance, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So the article seems to suggest those are the kinds of traits or maybe behaviors she's encountered more with men her own age.
Even if it doesn't list specific examples from her life, that's the implication, right? That these patterns are more common in that demographic from her perspective.
Yeah, that's the strong suggestion, that men in, say, their late 40s, 50s, her peers, might exhibit these attitudes more often.
Which she finds less appealing or maybe problematic in relationships.
Precisely. So these behaviors, they're kind of falling under this broad label of toxic masculinity that gets talked about quite a bit.
And that framing, it lines up with a lot of the current conversation around the term, doesn't it?
It does.
It does make you wonder, though, if the article hints at what kinds of interactions she found difficult. Like, was it about emotional unavailability? Or maybe that pressure some men feel, to always be the provider, never show weakness.
The article doesn't seem to go that deep into specifics, but it frames her preference as a reaction. Not just, I like younger guys, but more like a response to these broader patterns she sees in older men.
So, navigating the dating world by sort of sidestepping dynamics she finds unhelpful or maybe even harmful.
Yeah, exactly. It's presented almost like a strategy based on her observations.
And if you pull back a bit, look at the bigger picture, it touches on how different generations might have been raised with different ideas about gender roles, about what it means to be a man.
For sure. What was maybe seen as typically manly 20, 30 years ago might be viewed very differently now through today's lens.
Hmm.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The article isn't just saying this is who she likes. It's positioning her choice as a comment on ingrained societal stuff within a particular generation.
Yeah, it elevates it beyond just personal taste. It connects it to perceived cultural patterns.
Right.
So essentially, the core message from this World Star piece seems to be Tracee Ellis Ross's dating choices are, according to them, shaped by her view that certain potentially rigid or harmful aspects of traditional masculinity
The toxic aspects.
exactly are more common or more pronounced in men closer to her own age.
Okay, so let's just quickly summarize what we've pulled from this worldstar.com article then.
Go for it.
Essentially, as presented in the source, Tracee Ellis Ross states a preference for younger men.
And the reason given.
The reason cited is her perception of and experiences with what the article labels toxic masculinity being more prevalent in men her own age.
Right, and that leaves us and you listening with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it?
Definitely. What's the takeaway thought?
Well, does this perspective maybe highlight real generational shifts, differences in how masculinity is understood, how it's expressed across age groups?
And what could that tell us about how society's expectations around gender, around relationships, are maybe evolving
Hmm.
or clashing?
Exactly. It's something to think about how your own observations, your own experiences might line up or maybe contrast with this whole discussion. Food for thought.